Health 94, Jeremy Vine here. Have you ever been a victim of serious stalking? Someone scrutinising your every move, somebody following you to work maybe, sharing your intimate moments with family and leaving you constantly looking over your shoulder? Imagine that happening for 7 years, the stress you would feel. It's exactly what befell Dr Ellie Aston, who met her stalker through her work at a GP surgery in Gloucester. A retired builder, Raymond Knight, stalked Dr Aston for 7 years after meeting her in 2006 when she became his GP. By 2007, Knight had begun behaving inappropriately, sending her flowers and cards under the delusion that they were former partners. It escalated quickly, resulting in a restraining order banning Knight from contacting Dr Aston. But the stalking continued for years. It even persisted through a 2-year community order and a 44-month jail sentence. He is behind bars now, but he'll come out. And not surprisingly, Dr Aston became very paranoid and anxious, had to take time off work, got therapy even for PTSD, and is fearing the moment this man is set free from jail next year. She joins me in the studio. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Also here is Richard Graham, the MP for Gloucester, who's campaigning with Alex Chalk to increase the maximum stalking sentence. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you in a moment. So, Dr Aston, first of all, Eleanor, how did this start?
Well, I met Mr Knight in 2006. He was a patient of mine at the GP surgery, and I got to know him reasonably well over a period of time because he'd come in and see me on a regular basis. Then he started sending some cards, flowers, putting in inappropriate comments in the cards, and he was told to stop doing that by the practice. And then a lot of very disturbing behaviour happened after that. There was a lot of vandalism to the surgery, there was criminal damage to my room, to my property, to my car, and it escalated from there.
So you were certain that was him?
He was never charged with most of those offences because unfortunately there wasn't enough evidence on the CCTV and the CPS didn't take it any further. For those of us who knew him, who saw the images, we were fairly sure it was him, but no, he was never charged with those things. But eventually it started that he would be wandering around the surgery, watching me and to surgery, leaving surgery, going on visits. He would follow me home, he would follow me on visits, and this happened over 100 times over the course of about 4 to 5 weeks until he was finally arrested after taking a lot of photographs outside the surgery.
And how soon was his arrest after it all started? A couple of years maybe?
Well, initially he was just given a restraining order. His first arrest after the cards and flowers, he was arrested and given a restraining order, but then after that it was another couple of years before he was then arrested again.
And for you, that 2 years before action was taken were, I imagine, extremely stressful.
Yes, you start living in a state of continuous anxiety, and he used to drive a white van, and so every time I'd see a white van on the road I'd be looking at the number plate, and you're living in a state of permanent anxiety and paranoia, and it's extremely uncomfortable. And
the natural thought, I suppose, for most of us is, well, you go and reason with him. Do you go and talk to him and say, look, what's the problem here?
The problem is that he had also alleged at that time that we'd had a relationship and had been saying various untruths to people around the area. And so it was felt that there was no point talking to him because he had a belief system in his head which was untrue. We'd never had a relationship. And so therefore actually talking to him would only fuel the fire, as it were. That's what he wanted. He wanted contact with me.
And when you were at home at night, at the weekend and so on, would he turn up? Would you be worried about that?
We only found him outside the house once when my husband came back from nursery after having picked up my daughter, and he was standing watching the house. Unfortunately, of course, I don't know if he was standing outside the house every night for 2 years. He could quite possibly have been. And it's extremely uncomfortable living like that because you are looking over your shoulder all the time.
So you almost start to do, it gets military. I guess you start to do counter-surveillance in some way, do you?
Yes, well, we got CCTV around the house. When I'd come home from work, I'd drive past the house, go round the roundabout, come back to check he wasn't following me. My children weren't allowed to go on trips from their nursery and school in case he was following them without anybody seeing. We had to have safety plans in place in case I was being followed on my way home from work to pick up the children and they needed to be kept in the classroom. It becomes a very military sort of an organisation.
And it affects, obviously, your whole life, top to bottom, and your psychology as well.
Yes, I went from being an extremely strong, independent person. I'd done well professionally. I had a good life. To at one point I was hiding behind the sofa because I was quite sure that he was out there hunting for me.
And so how do you deal with that?
Eventually, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and it actually took quite a long time of EMDR therapy, intensive therapy, which is used on war veterans for traumatic instances, to enable me to go back to work. I did honestly believe at one point that I wasn't going to be able to carry on.
Describe the circumstances of his eventual jailing.
Well, he had been released from prison. He'd been in a bail hostel on the south coast, and he drove a hire car up into Gloucestershire, which was breaching his restraining order, and he sent some letters, one to my home address. It had 3 sheets in it. The first one said, "Do." The second one said, "Guess who's back?" And the third one said, "I'm back." And he also sent a threatening letter to my work. They were fingerprinted, and he was also proved to have breached his restraining order, and he was arrested again.
And the judge basically couldn't do any more than she did, is that right?
Absolutely. He was very frustrated, and he said so in court, that he couldn't give a higher sentence than 5 years, and he really didn't feel that the punishment fitted the crime. And he charged both the detective constable in charge of the case and ourselves to contact our MP to try and get some legislative changes. And Alex Chalk got involved, who is the MP for Cheltenham, and then Richard Graham, the MP for Gloucester, also got involved, and that's what we're currently doing, campaigning for changes.
So, Richard, what's the key lesson here, do you think, for a lawmaker like yourself?
Well, I think the key lesson is that stalking is a relatively recent crime. It only became a crime officially in 2012, and I think it's still evolving, and we don't know enough about stalking and stalkers at the moment. The Home Office is reviewing whether there should be a special protection order for people being stalked. The Sentencing Guidelines Council is going to look at the sentencing on stalking. And we don't really yet have a rehab programme to try and help get people who've been stalking out of the obsessive behaviour and their obsession with their victim that they're currently in. So there's a lot
he's
of
gone
work
to
be
jail.
done. He's gone to jail.
So
yeah.
he's not getting any psychiatric treatment in there, is he?
I don't think
he's
anything.
Being punished.
No, I think that's right, and I think, as Dr Aston would say, I mean, she's safe for as long as he's in there. But when he comes out, all the worry is going to start again. That's what Lily Allen said last week. And because the sentences are so short, the actual average sentence served is only 10 months. It means that there isn't a very long period of safety before the stalker is out again.
So, Eleanor, sorry, I'm calling you Eleanor. Is that okay?
Yes,
I'm veering between Eleanor and Dr Aston. You worry that he's out next year,
yes,
is he?
Yes.
And looking at your description of him, he obviously has completely got this single obsession, and I guess then he's outside your house the following day or something, is
Absolutely.
he?
Well, it's what he's done every time he's come out of prison over the past 7 years. There's no way to think that he would change his behaviour because he has the same belief system, so why on earth would he? So yes, it would. As soon as he comes out, it'll be back to watching the front door, watching the cars, seeing if I'm being followed every day until he does it
and
again.
then presumably you can then launch legal action rapidly this time.
Yes, but of course you have to get proof as well. There has to be indisputable proof that he's doing these things, and that's quite hard to get if somebody's following you, or you just have a feeling that somebody's behaving in an abnormal way. You have to get the proof together. So of course, to get the proof, he has to do things several times usually before you can get enough together. And yes, the hope is that maybe the laws will have changed next time so that there will be an increased maximal penalty that he could get next time.
Because the other thought here is that you are in danger.
Yes, he's escalated his behaviour. There is a lot of research to show that an awful lot of seriously violent crimes, homicide, start with stalking, and unfortunately it often ends up like that. And so yes, me and my family are in danger.
And Richard, is that your thought as well?
That is absolutely right, Jeremy. I mean, Dr Aston said the research done by the chair of the Domestic Homicide Review Board said that 100% of the cases she's looked at have got stalking or coercive control behind them. The Met's figure is slightly different. They've only got 40%, but I think that's because they haven't really looked in detail at that coercive control behind the homicide. So that's a terrifying figure. And what we're finding is when you look into it and you start talking to people, there are more and more cases of really dangerous stalking around, and a lot of people don't report them until they've been going on for a very long time. So you asked what we should do as legislators. I think we have to do more. We've got to find a way of somehow getting people out of stalking, but meanwhile we've got to lock the very dangerous ones up for longer. That's what I've asked the Justice Minister to do.
And the funny thing about this fellow Raymond Knight is he was previously a pillar of the community, I gather. Yes,
he doesn't have any history of mental health problems or contact with the police. He was born and grew up in Gloucestershire, as far as I'm aware, and there was never any issue before. So this was completely out of the blue and unexpected.
And when you look back, Eleanor, can you work out there was one instant where somehow he decided to target you? Something happened?
Yes, we had a consultation before he went on holiday once, and he came back and he sent a complaint in that I had sworn at him and also said some unpleasant things to him in that consultation. It turns out that it was a misunderstanding, and I certainly never swore at him, but we brought him in and I had a long chat with him, with one of my partners as well, and we sorted it all out, and we sorted out the misunderstanding. There was no issue. He wanted to carry on seeing me as his GP. We felt it was inappropriate because there had been a breakdown of the doctor-patient relationship on both sides, really. So he carried on seeing one of my colleagues. Then cards, flowers happened after that. Then he was told by the surgery not to contact me anymore, and then the behaviour started.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr Ellie Aston, stalked for 7 years by 74-year-old Raymond Knight, who's in jail now but is coming out, we think, next year. And Richard Graham, who's MP for Gloucester and is campaigning to increase the maximum stalking sentence.